The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the mahogany desk where Marcus Wellington sat, his silver pen moving across quarterly reports with mechanical precision. In the corner of his home office, a framed photo collected dust, a 5-year-old boy with gap-toothed smile holding up a finger painting. Marcus hadn't looked at it in months. He didn't need to. The image was burned into his memory from a time when things were simpler, before the empire, before the silence that now filled the 23 rooms of his Connecticut estate. What Marcus didn't know was that in exactly 47 days, a woman who scrubbed his floors would shatter everything he thought he understood about his life. She would show him something hidden in plain sight, a truth so devastating and beautiful that it would bring this man who'd forgotten how to feel to his knees in his son's empty bedroom, finally understanding what he'd been running from all these years. But tonight, like every night, Marcus Wellington had no idea his entire world was built on a foundation of sand. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Wellington estate sprawled across 12 acres in Greenwich, Connecticut, where old money whispered through manicured hedges and success was measured in dignified silence. Marcus Wellington had built his fortune the hard way, turning his father's modest real estate firm into Wellington Global Properties, a billion-dollar empire with development spanning 3 continents. At 48, he had everything the American dream promised: wealth, power, respect, and a legacy that would outlive him. Everything except the ability to embrace his own son. Marcus's morning began at 5:47 a.m., exactly as it had for the past 15 years. His Apple Watch vibrated him awake in the master suite's California king bed, a bed he slept in alone since his wife Diane's accident 3 years ago. The other side remained perfectly made, pillows arranged just as the interior designer had specified. He rose, showered in the Italian marble bathroom, and dressed in one of his 30 identical Tom Ford suits. Grey. Always grey. The color of steel, of skyscrapers, of certainty. By 6:15, he was in his home office on the 3rd floor, the sprawling room that overlooked the estate's grounds. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Connecticut landscape like a painting he never looked at. His mahogany desk, imported from a London auction house, held 3 monitors displaying real-time data from Tokyo, London, and New York markets. The room smelled of leather and old books, books purchased by the shelf to fill the walls, never read. Marcus heard the soft footsteps in the hallway. He knew it was his son Ethan preparing for school. 14 years old now, though Marcus sometimes forgot and still thought of him as 10. They lived in the same house, but inhabited different universes, their orbits carefully calculated to avoid collision. "Father?" Ethan's voice came from the doorway, tentative as morning light. Marcus didn't look up from his screen. Tokyo was showing promising movement in the commercial sector. "You'll miss the car. Gerald is waiting." "I know. I just wanted to ask Mrs. Chen. I have a call with Singapore in 3 minutes." The silence stretched like taffy. Marcus could feel his son's presence, could sense the weight of unspoken words pressing against the air between them. Part of him, some small buried part, wanted to turn, to see what his son looked like this morning, to notice if he'd grown taller, if his voice had deepened further, if he still had that cowlick that refused to be tamed. But Marcus Wellington didn't do soft things. He built empires. "Yes, father." The footsteps retreated, each one a small defeat echoing down the marble hallway. Marcus's jaw tightened imperceptibly, the only sign that he'd registered the interaction at all. He pulled up the Singapore contact and waited for the video call to connect, pushing down the familiar ache that lived somewhere beneath his sternum, that unnamed thing he'd learned to ignore like background noise. The day proceeded with clockwork precision. Mrs. Rosa Martinez, his housekeeper of 10 years, moved through the house like a ghost, cleaning rooms that were already clean, preparing meals that would barely be touched. She was a stout woman in her mid-50s, with kind eyes and calloused hands that had scrubbed floors in 5 different countries before landing in this gilded cage. She'd watched Ethan grow from a curious 4-year-old into a withdrawn teenager, had seen the light slowly dim in his eyes like a sunset in slow motion. Rosa knew things about the Wellington house that Marcus never noticed. She knew that Ethan kept every birthday card his father's assistant had signed on Marcus's behalf, stored in a shoebox under his bed. She knew that the boy would sometimes stand outside his father's office for 5, 10, 15 minutes, building courage to knock, only to walk away without making a sound. She knew that Ethan had learned to cry silently, pillow pressed to his face at 2 a.m., because any sound might disturb the careful silence his father had constructed around himself like armor. Marcus spent his day in back-to-back meetings, each one a performance of controlled power. He negotiated a $70 million deal before lunch, fired a VP who'd failed to meet projections, and approved plans for a new development in Dubai. His assistant, Jennifer, moved pieces across his schedule like chess pieces, ensuring he never had a moment to think, to feel, to remember. Lunch was a protein shake consumed at his desk. Dinner was whatever Mrs. Martinez left in the warmer, usually untouched. He worked until midnight, the glow of screens casting blue shadows across his face, making him look like a ghost in his own home. Ethan, meanwhile, navigated his own isolated world. He attended Riverside Preparatory Academy, where children of diplomats and CEOs learned to be polite strangers to each other. He excelled in subjects that required no emotional intelligence: mathematics, computer science, chemistry. He struggled in English class, where Mrs. Peterson kept asking him to write about his feelings, his family, his home life. How could he write about a home that felt like a museum? A father who was a statue in a suit. In the evenings, Ethan would retreat to his room, a teenage sanctuary that Rosa kept impeccably clean. He'd lose himself in code, building virtual worlds where logic ruled and emotions could be programmed away. Sometimes he'd pull up old videos on his laptop, birthday parties from when he was 5, 6, 7, before Mom's accident, before the silence. In those grainy clips, his father would smile, would swing him in the air, would make pancakes on Sunday mornings and deliberately burn them while laughing. That man didn't exist anymore. Or if he did, Ethan couldn't find him. Mrs. Martinez would knock softly at 8 p.m. with dinner on a tray. "Your father's working late again," she'd say, though they both knew it wasn't about work. It was about the careful architecture of avoidance they'd all built together. Brick by brick, year by year. "I know, Rosa, thank you." She'd pause at the door, wanting to say something to bridge the gap between father and son. But it wasn't her place, not yet. Not until she found the right moment, the right key to unlock the truth she'd discovered. The house settled into its nightly routine. Marcus in his office, Ethan in his room, Rosa in the servants' quarters adjacent to the kitchen. 3 souls living separate lives under one roof, connected by blood and payroll, but divided by canyons of unspoken pain. Marcus would sometimes pause in his work, usually around 11 p.m. when exhaustion began to crack his armor. He'd find himself staring at nothing, his reflection ghostly in the darkened window. In those moments, he'd remember Diane, her laugh, her warmth, the way she'd been the bridge between him and Ethan. She'd translated their love for each other, made it accessible, kept the current flowing. When she died, the bridge collapsed, and Marcus, terrified of drowning in grief, had simply stopped trying to cross. He told himself Ethan was better off with stability, with discipline, with a father who provided rather than one who might break down crying in the middle of dinner. He told himself that keeping his distance was protection, not punishment. He told himself a lot of things in the silence of his office. The night would end with Marcus finally climbing the stairs to his bedroom, passing Ethan's closed door without pausing, without knocking, without allowing himself to imagine his son sleeping just beyond that barrier. He'd lie in his California King, staring at the ceiling, counting deals instead of sheep, until exhaustion claimed him. And tomorrow would be exactly the same. And the day after that, and the day after that, until Rosa Martinez decided it was time to show Marcus Wellington what he couldn't or wouldn't see for himself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, shattering Marcus Wellington's carefully constructed routine like a stone through cathedral. Glass. Marcus was in the middle of reviewing architectural plans for the Shanghai project when Jennifer's voice crackled through the intercom, unusually hesitant. "Mr. Wellington, there's a Dr. Patricia Morrison from Riverside Prep on line 2. She says it's urgent." Marcus felt something cold slide down his spine. Urgent. That word didn't belong in his controlled universe. He picked up the receiver, his voice steady despite the sudden acceleration of his pulse. "Marcus Wellington speaking. Mr. Wellington, this is Dr. Morrison, the school psychologist at Riverside Preparatory." Her voice carried the careful neutrality of someone delivering bad news professionally. "I'm calling about Ethan. There's been an incident." The word incident hung in the air like smoke. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities: drugs, fighting, academic dishonesty. Anything but what came next. "Your son collapsed during AP chemistry today." "He's physically fine," she added quickly. "But Mr. Wellington, when was the last time you checked if Ethan was actually eating?" The question struck him like a physical blow. "Excuse me?" The school nurse found evidence of severe malnutrition. "Ethan weighs barely 98 pounds. He's been throwing away his lunches for months, and when we asked him why..." Dr. Morrison paused, choosing her words carefully. "He said food tastes like nothing." "That everything tastes like nothing." Marcus stood abruptly, his chair rolling backward into the bookshelf. "That's impossible. Mrs. Martinez prepares his meals every day. I see the reports. Do you, Mr. Wellington?" Dr. Morrison's voice carried a gentle challenge. "When was the last time you actually saw your son eat?" The silence that followed was damning. Marcus couldn't remember. Days, weeks? He'd been so focused on ensuring Ethan had the best nutrition plan money could buy, the finest ingredients, the most balanced meals. But seeing him eat, sitting with him, that belonged to a different lifetime. "We need you to come get him," Dr. Morrison continued. "And Mr. Wellington? I've scheduled a mandatory family counseling session for Friday at 3 p.m. Ethan's not in crisis yet, but he's standing at the edge of one. We need to act now." Marcus ended the call and stood frozen in his office, the afternoon sun streaming through windows that suddenly felt like prison bars. For the first time in years, his armor cracked. He looked at his hands that could sign billion-dollar deals, but had forgotten how to ruffle his son's hair. Hands that built empires, but couldn't build a sandwich to share with a lonely boy. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat in his Tesla, the car's AI navigating to Riverside Prep while his mind navigated unfamiliar territory. Fear, pure, undiluted parental fear. He'd spent 3 years building walls between himself and Ethan, convinced he was protecting them both from the grief of losing Diane. Instead, he'd been watching his son slowly disappear, and he'd been too blind to notice. The school's nurse's office smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Ethan sat on the examination table, his legs dangling like a child half his age, staring at his phone with the practiced disinterest of a teenager who'd learned to expect disappointment. "Ethan," Marcus said, and was shocked by how uncertain his own voice sounded. His son's head jerked up, eyes wide with surprise. Marcus realized with a jolt that Ethan had expected the driver or Mrs. Martinez, or anyone but his father, to collect him. "You came," Ethan whispered, and those 2 words carried the weight of 1,000 lonely dinners, 1,000 unanswered questions, 1,000 nights waiting for a good night that never came. The drive home was suffocating in its silence, but it was different from their usual silence. This one vibrated with unspoken questions, with fear, with the desperate energy of 2 people trapped in an elevator, forced to acknowledge each other's existence. Marcus gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "The doctor said you haven't been eating." "I eat enough." Ethan's voice was flat, Rehearsed. 98 pounds is not enough for a 14-year-old boy who's 5'7". How do you know how tall I am? The question landed like a grenade. Marcus didn't know. He'd guessed based on, what, memory? Hope? He said nothing, and his silence was its own terrible answer. They arrived home to find Mrs. Martinez waiting at the entrance, her face creased with worry. She'd clearly been crying. "Mijo," she breathed when she saw Ethan, reaching for him instinctively before remembering her place and stepping back, but Ethan moved into her embrace anyway. This woman who was more mother to him than employee, and Marcus watched his son's shoulders shake with silent sobs while Rosa held him, whispering comfort in Spanish, words Marcus didn't understand, but whose meaning was crystal clear. Something shifted in that moment. Marcus truly saw, the web of relationships he'd ignored. His son had been raising himself with the help of a housekeeper, while Marcus played empire builder in his tower office. Ethan had been learning about life, about loss, about loneliness from everyone except the one person who should have guided him through it all. That evening, Marcus did something unprecedented. He cancelled his standing Wednesday call with the London office. He walked to Ethan's room, a journey of perhaps 30 feet that felt like crossing continents. He raised his hand to knock, then stopped. What would he say? "Sorry I've been absent for 3 years. Sorry I chose spreadsheets over you. Sorry I don't know how to be your father anymore without your mother here to show me how." Before he could decide, Rosa appeared in the hallway, carrying fresh linens. She looked at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read, pity mixed with something else. "Determination, perhaps, Mr. Wellington," she said softly. "May I speak with you?" In private, they stood in the library, surrounded by unread books and the musty smell of expensive isolation. Rosa clutched her hands together, clearly wrestling with something. "I've worked for you for 10 years, she began. "I've never interfered with family matters. But I can't watch this anymore. I can't watch that boy fade away like morning mist while you hide in your office." Marcus stiffened. "Mrs. Martinez, I don't think she would be ashamed of you." The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus stumbled backward, gripping the edge of a mahogany side table. "Mrs. Diane," Rosa continued, her voice breaking, "she made me promise before the accident. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would make sure you and Ethan would be okay. That you wouldn't lose each other." Tears streamed down her face now. "I failed her. I've watched you both disappear into your grief, and I've said nothing." But no more. Marcus's legs gave way. He sank into a leather armchair, his face in his hands. "I don't know how," he whispered. "I don't know how to do this without her. You learn," Rosa said firmly. "You try, you fail. You try again. That's what parents do. That's what she would have done." She moved to the door, then paused. "There's something you need to see. Something I've kept hidden because I thought it would hurt too much. But pain is better than nothing, Mr. Wellington, and nothing is what you're giving that boy." Marcus looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "What is it?" Rosa's hand trembled on the doorknob. "Come to the attic tomorrow, early before Ethan wakes. I'll show you what your son has been living with, what he's been hiding from you, what you've been too blind to see." She left him there, alone with his thoughts and the ghost of his wife's disappointment. Marcus sat in the darkening library as night fell over Connecticut, over his estate, over his carefully constructed world. Tomorrow, Rosa would show him the truth. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, Marcus Wellington wept for the first time since Diane's funeral, his sobs muffled by expensive throw pillows, his tears soaking into Italian leather, his empire of success crumbling around him like sandcastles before an incoming tide. In his room, Ethan lay awake, staring at his ceiling, wondering why his father had stood outside his door for 7 minutes and 33 seconds before walking away, wondering if things could ever be different, wondering if he even wanted them to be. The Wellington house settled into its restless sleep, all 3 inhabitants lying awake in their separate quarters, connected by threads of grief and guilt and the faint, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to find their way back to each other. The clock struck midnight. In 46 days, everything would change. But first, Rosa had to reveal what she'd discovered in the shadows of this broken home, a truth that would explain everything and nothing, that would break Marcus Wellington completely before it could begin to heal him. Marcus woke at 3:47 a.m., disoriented by the unfamiliar wetness on his pillow. For a moment, he couldn't place where he was. Then reality crashed back. He'd fallen asleep in the library armchair, still dressed in his Tom Ford suit, now rumpled and creased. His phone showed 47 missed calls, 12 from Tokyo alone. The markets had opened without him. His empire was spinning, and for the first time in 15 years, he hadn't been at the controls. He should panic. He should leap into action, salvage the deals, put out fires. Instead, he sat there, watching dawn creep through the mullioned windows, feeling like a stranger in his own skin. The house was silent, too silent. Marcus stood, his joints protesting, and made his way to the kitchen. Coffee. He needed coffee. But when he reached the gleaming sub-zero refrigerator, he stopped. He'd never actually made coffee in this kitchen. Mrs. Martinez always had it ready, perfectly timed to his schedule, appearing like magic in his office at precisely 6 a.m. He stood there, a billionaire in his $1 million kitchen, staring at a $20,000 espresso machine he didn't know how to operate. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. He'd built a life of luxury he couldn't actually live in, surrounded himself with tools he couldn't use, created a home he didn't know how to inhabit. The green button. "Mr. Wellington," then wait 30 seconds. He spun around. Rosa stood in the doorway, already dressed despite the early hour. Her eyes puffy from crying, but her spine straight with purpose. "I didn't mean to startle you," she said, moving past him with practiced efficiency. "But if we're going to the attic, you'll need coffee first. Trust me." Marcus wanted to refuse, to assert control, to remind her that he was the employer here. But something in her tone stopped him. A quiet authority that came from seeing him at his lowest, from witnessing his breakdown, from knowing truths he'd hidden even from himself. "The attic," he repeated, the word tasting strange. He owned this house, had bought it 5 years ago for $12 million, but he'd never ventured into the attic. That was Mrs. Martinez's domain, storage for things he'd paid people to pack away and forget. Rosa prepared the coffee with swift movements, her silence heavy with judgment. When she handed him the cup, black, no sugar, exactly how he'd taken it for 20 years, their eyes met. "You're going to want to turn off your phone," she said. "I can't just—" "Yes, you can." Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "For 1 hour, Mr. Wellington, the world can spin without you. Your son has been spinning without you for 3 years. The world survived. He barely is." The words hit their mark. Marcus pulled out his iPhone, stared at the glowing screen, showing urgent messages from 3 continents, and powered it down. The silence, when the device went dark, felt like falling. They climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, then up the narrow servant staircase Marcus had never used. Each step felt like ascending to judgment. The attic door was small, nondescript, painted the same cream as the walls, designed to disappear. Rosa produced a key from her apron pocket. "I'm the only one who comes up here," she explained. "Once a month to check for leaks, to keep things organized." She pushed open the door. "But 3 months ago I found something that explained everything." The attic was surprisingly spacious, running the length of the house, filled with the detritus of lives lived and abandoned. Christmas decorations in labeled bins, old furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts, boxes marked Diane's studio that Marcus had ordered sealed after the funeral. Unable to face his wife's art supplies, her half-finished paintings, her dreams interrupted, but Rosa led him past all of this, to a corner where light filtered through a small dormer window. There, arranged like a shrine, was a space Marcus didn't recognize. A sleeping bag lay on the floor, pillow at one end. Around it, carefully organized, was a child's version of survival. A camping lantern, stacks of protein bars, bottles of water, a first aid kit. But what made Marcus's breath catch were the walls. Every surface was covered with drawings, hundreds of them, Pencil sketches, watercolors, charcoal studies, all bearing the same shaky signature, E.W., Ethan Wellington. His son's hand, growing steadier and more confident as the drawings progressed from childish scribbles to sophisticated portraits. And every single one was of the same subject, Marcus himself. There was Marcus laughing, though Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed. Marcus reading the newspaper captured in minute detail. Marcus standing at his office window, shoulders hunched under invisible weight. Marcus sleeping, and Marcus realized with horror that Ethan must have crept into his room to observe him, to steal these moments of vulnerability. "He comes up here almost every night," Rosa whispered, "after you go to your office. He sleeps here sometimes when the house feels too empty. When he can't bear to be in his room, waiting for you to come say goodnight." Marcus moved like a sleepwalker, examining each drawing. There were pages of hands, his hands studied from photographs, from memory, from desperate observation. Hands he'd never extended to comfort, to hold, to connect. "But this," Rosa said, her voice breaking, "this is what you need to see." She pulled out a large portfolio from behind a covered dresser. Inside were dozens of larger pieces, more ambitious works. Marcus recognized the style immediately, Diane's style. Somehow, impossibly, Ethan had inherited his mother's gift, had taught himself to see the world through her artistic eyes. But these weren't just any drawings. They were blueprints of imagination, architectural sketches of a house that didn't exist. A home with a large kitchen where faceless figures cooked together. A living room with a fireplace and people gathered around. A study where two figures sat side by side, one teaching the other. Every room was labeled in careful print. The house where Dad would stay, the kitchen where we'd talk, the study where he'd help with homework. Ethan had designed an entire imaginary home, a fantasy of the life he wished he had. The final drawing was different. It showed this house, the Wellington estate, but transformed. Every window glowed with warm light. The gardens were full of people, and in the center, sketched with painstaking detail, were two figures, a tall man and a teenage boy, standing together on the front steps. The man's hand on the boy's shoulder. Below it, in writing that had been erased and rewritten dozens of times, were the words, "Maybe someday." Marcus's knees buckled. He sank to the floor, surrounded by his son's desperate artwork, this gallery of longing and loss. The sleeping bag smelled faintly of Ethan's shampoo. The protein bar wrappers were neatly stacked. His son had been surviving on these. Marcus realized, not because Mrs. Martinez didn't prepare food, but because eating alone in the formal dining room was too painful. Up here, in this secret sanctuary, Ethan could pretend he was camping, adventuring, anywhere but in a house that felt like a mausoleum. "How long?" Marcus managed to choke out. "How long has he been doing this?" "The drawings? Since Mrs. Diane died. But sleeping up here?" "About a year. After you missed his 13th birthday because of the Dubai crisis," Marcus remembered that day. There had been a problem with permits, millions of dollars at stake. He'd worked through the night, resolved the issue, saved the deal. He'd thought he was being responsible, being the provider Ethan needed. He'd never asked what Ethan needed. He'd never thought to ask. "I can't do this," Marcus said, standing abruptly, backing toward the door. "I can't, this is too much. He needs therapy, professional help, not a father who what?" Rosa's voice cut through his panic. "Who loves him? Who's scared? Mr. Wellington, that boy doesn't need perfection. He needs you. You don't understand." Marcus's voice rose, anger replacing anguish, the familiar refuge of men who'd forgotten how to feel. "I built this life to give him everything, security, stability, a future. I work 80 hours a week so he'll never want for anything. He wants you." Rosa shouted back, her composure finally cracking. "He wants a father who knows his favorite color is purple, not blue like you told his teacher. He wants someone who notices when he makes honor roll. He wants what those drawings show, a dad who stays. Well, maybe I can't be that." The words exploded from Marcus, years of fear and failure erupting. "Maybe I'm too broken, too much like my own father, too—" He stopped. The words hung in the air like smoke. "My own father? Charles Wellington, who'd built his real estate business through ruthless efficiency, who'd taught Marcus that emotions were weakness, that love was a liability, that success was the only language worth speaking. Your father, Rosa said quietly, beat you when you cried. I remember Mrs. Diane telling me, late one night when she'd had too much wine. She said you'd learned that feelings were dangerous, that showing love meant getting hurt. Marcus stared at her, exposed, naked in his truth. But you're not him. Mr. Wellington, you're scared of becoming him, so you've become nothing instead. You've erased yourself so completely that your son has to draw you to remember you exist. The fight drained from Marcus. He looked around the attic, at the sleeping bag where his son sought refuge, at the drawings that mapped a child's desperate hope, at the protein bars that kept a boy alive while his soul slowly starved. What do I do? He whispered. Rosa moved to the portfolio, pulled out one more drawing Marcus hadn't seen, a simple sketch of two hands reaching toward each other, not quite touching, the space between them filled with carefully drawn light. You start, she said, by being brave enough to reach back. Marcus took the drawing with trembling hands. Below the image, in Ethan's careful script, was a quote Marcus recognized from one of Diane's favorite poems. The longest journey begins with a single step toward each other. He stood there, holding his son's hope, surrounded by evidence of love he'd been too blind to see, too afraid to accept. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the dormer window, illuminating dust motes that danced like stars. Somewhere below, Ethan was waking up, preparing for another day of careful distance, practiced disappointment, learned loneliness. Marcus looked at Rosa. This woman who'd kept his son's secrets, who'd preserved this shrine of hope, who'd waited for the right moment to shatter his denial. The counseling session, he said. Friday at 3 p.m., she nodded. I'll be there, he continued, his voice gaining strength. But first I need to figure out how to talk to my own son. You don't figure it out, Rosa said gently. You just do it, imperfectly, honestly, scared out of your mind. That's what real fathers do. Marcus descended from the attic carrying the drawing of reaching hands, leaving behind his armor of denial, his fortress of fear. The house felt different now, not empty but full of possibility, heavy with missed chances and future hope. It was 7:15 a.m. Ethan would be having breakfast or pretending to. The Thursday morning stretched ahead, full of choices Marcus had never allowed himself to consider. He could go to his office, bury himself in conference calls, pretend this morning never happened. He could be the Marcus Wellington the world expected, powerful, controlled, untouchable, or he could walk into that kitchen and try, for the first time in 3 years, to be a father. His hand shook as he reached for the kitchen door, the drawing clutched in his other hand like a talisman. Through the frosted glass, he could see Ethan's silhouette hunched over the counter, probably scrolling through his phone, armored in his own practiced isolation. Marcus took a breath, remembering Rosa's words, imperfectly, honestly. Scared out of your mind. He pushed open the door. The kitchen door swung open, and Ethan's head snapped up from his phone. For a moment, father and son froze. Two strangers caught in an elevator, unprepared for proximity. Father. Ethan's voice was careful, neutral. Did you need something? Mrs. Martinez's, I wanted to make you breakfast. The words tumbled out before Marcus could stop them. Clumsy and uncertain, Ethan blinked. You? Marcus looked around the kitchen, his $20,000 kitchen, and realized he had no idea where anything was. The pans, the eggs. Did they even have eggs? Rosa had discreetly vanished, leaving him to navigate this foreign territory alone. Marcus started, then stopped. The drawing in his hand felt like it was burning. I don't actually know how. The admission hung in the air. Ethan's expression shifted through confusion, suspicion, and something that might have been the ghost of hope before settling back into careful blankness. There's cereal in the pantry, Ethan said, turning back to his phone. I usually just have that. You hate cereal. The words came from somewhere deep in Marcus's memory, a 6-year-old Ethan pushing away a bowl of Cheerios, demanding his mother's blueberry pancakes. Ethan's fingers stilled on his phone screen. "You remember that?" "I remember." Marcus moved into the kitchen, awkward as a giant in a dollhouse. "I remember you said it was like eating cardboard circles. You wanted pancakes, always pancakes, with chocolate chips arranged in a smiley face." The silence stretched so thin, Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Ethan's knuckles were white around his phone. "That was 8 years ago." Ethan whispered, "I know. You haven't mentioned it once in 8 years." "I know." Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against Italian tile. "I have to get ready for school. Gerald will be here in 20 minutes. "Actually," Marcus said, the decision crystallizing as he spoke, "you're not going to school today." Ethan turned, eyes wide. "What, they call it a mental health day?" "We're going—" Marcus paused, realizing he had no plan beyond this moment. Where did fathers and sons go? What did they do? "We're going somewhere, together. Together." Ethan repeated the word like it was foreign. "You have the Tokyo briefing at 9. The Berlin conference call at 11. You never miss. Jennifer can handle Tokyo. Berlin can wait." Marcus pulled out his phone, still powered off from the attic, and deliberately placed it on the counter. "Today they all wait." Ethan stared at the phone like it was a bomb. His father's lifeline, his constant companion, his excuse for every absence, every missed moment. Seeing it abandoned on the counter seemed to violate the laws of physics. "Is this about yesterday?" Ethan's voice turned defensive. "Dr. Morrison called you, didn't she? This is some kind of court-ordered bonding, or this is about me being a coward for 3 years?" Marcus's voice cracked. "This is about me finding your drawings." The color drained from Ethan's face. "You went in the attic. Rosa showed me. She had no right." Ethan's voice rose, panic replacing defensiveness. "Those were private. They were mine." "I know, and I'm sorry. But Ethan—" Marcus took a step forward, then stopped, unsure. "The house you drew, the imaginary one, with the kitchen where we'd talk—" "Stop." Ethan's hands were shaking. "Just stop. I don't need your pity. I don't need you to suddenly pretend to care because you feel guilty. I've survived this long without a father," Marcus finished. "Without me, I know. And you shouldn't have had to." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes, but he blinked them back furiously, a skill learned from 3 years of practice, of crying silently into pillows, of being strong because no one was there to tell him he could be weak. Why now? The question came out broken. Why, after everything, why now? Marcus looked down at the drawing in his hands, the 2 hands reaching toward each other, separated by carefully drawn light. "Because I'm terrified that if I wait one more day, you'll stop reaching, and I'll have lost you forever." The admission cost him everything, every wall, every defense, every carefully constructed piece of armor. He stood there, a billionaire in a rumpled suit, holding his son's artwork like a white flag of surrender. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Gerald, "Car ready." "Where is young Mr. Wellington?" Neither of them moved to answer it. "Where would we even go?" Ethan asked finally, his voice small. Marcus thought about the country club, the yacht, the private jet waiting at the airfield. All the expensive toys he'd accumulated, none of which seemed right for this moment. Then he remembered something else, something from before. "Do you remember Mackie's Diner on Route 7? Ethan's eyes widened. "The place with the pancakes. Your mother took us there every Sunday." Marcus's voice was thick with memory. "Before I got too important for diners, too busy for blueberry pancakes. It's probably not even there anymore. Only one way to find out." Ethan hesitated, warring with himself. Marcus could see it, the desperate hope fighting with learned disappointment, the child who'd waited years for this moment battling with the teenager who'd learned not to trust in miracles. "And if we go," Ethan said slowly, "and you get a call, and you have to leave in the middle to handle some emergency—" "I left my phone here." Marcus gestured to the counter. "No calls, no emergencies, just us, if you'll give me the chance." "I don't know how to do this," Ethan confessed, his voice breaking. I don't know how to be around you when you're actually here. Neither do I, Marcus admitted. I guess we'll figure it out together. Badly, awkwardly, making every mistake in the book. For the first time in 3 years, something like a smile ghosted across Ethan's face. That sounds terrible. Probably will be. And after today, when reality comes back, when you remember you have an empire to run and I'm just in the way? Marcus moved then, crossing the kitchen in 3 strides, stopping just short of his son. Close enough to see the fear in Ethan's eyes, the hope he was trying desperately to hide. Close enough to reach out if he dared. You were never in the way, Marcus said. I was. I was in the way of being your father, in the way of loving you like you deserved. I was so busy being terrified of failing you that I succeeded in losing you instead. Ethan's phone buzzed again. Gerald wondering where they were. Tell him we won't need him today, Marcus said. Ethan stared at his father, searching for the trick, the catch, the inevitable disappointment. But Marcus held his gaze, steady despite the fear coursing through him, despite having no idea how to be what his son needed. I'm going to hurt you again, Marcus warned. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to say the wrong things, do the wrong things. I'm broken in ways I'm only beginning to understand. I know, Ethan whispered, but I want to try. If you'll let me. The moment stretched between them, a chasm 3 years wide, filled with all the missed bedtimes, the forgotten birthdays, the silent dinners, the lonely nights. All of it hovering in the space between father and son, waiting to see if they had the courage to bridge it. Ethan picked up his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen. Then he typed, "Won't need the car today, Gerald. Thanks." He hit send and the decision was made. Marcus exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. So, Mackie's Diner, do you even remember how to drive yourself? There was a hint of challenge in Ethan's voice, but also something lighter, something that might with time become humor. I'll figure it out. How hard can it be? You haven't driven yourself anywhere in 5 years. Then it'll be an adventure. Ethan grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair, a worn denim thing Marcus had never seen before. So unlike the pristine designer clothes that filled his son's closet. This is insane. Completely, Marcus agreed. We'll probably end up sitting there in total awkward silence, not knowing what to say to each other. Almost certainly. And you'll probably get syrup on your Tom Ford suit. Marcus looked down at his rumpled, slept-in suit, already ruined. Good thing I have 29 more. Something cracked in Ethan then, some final wall, and he laughed. It was small, uncertain, rusty from disuse, but it was real. Marcus felt his chest tighten hearing it, realizing how long it had been since he'd heard his son's laughter. They stood in the kitchen, neither quite sure what to do next. Years of distance couldn't be erased in a moment, couldn't be fixed with pancakes and good intentions. But somewhere in the space between them, in the morning light streaming through expensive windows, something shifted. Marcus held out the car keys. Symbolic since the Tesla was keyless, but the gesture felt important. Ethan looked at them, then at his father's face, searching for the inevitable retreat, the excuse, the emergency that would pull Marcus back into his safe, controllable world. But Marcus stood there waiting, offering more than keys, offering a choice, offering a chance. Okay, Ethan said finally, his voice barely audible. Let's go get pancakes. And in those 5 words, the Wellington house began, for the first time in 3 years, to feel less like a museum and more like a home where anything, even healing, might be possible. Rosa watched from the kitchen window as father and son climbed into the Tesla, neither quite knowing how to navigate this new territory. Marcus fumbled with the touchscreen, while Ethan showed him how to shift into reverse. They backed into a topiary hedge, corrected, then finally made it down the long driveway. She said a small prayer in Spanish, for courage, for grace, for second chances that shouldn't be wasted. As the Tesla disappeared through the gates, heading toward a diner that might not even exist anymore, toward conversations they didn't know how to have, toward a future that was far from certain. One thing was clear, the decision had been made. The point of no return had been crossed. What came next would determine everything. The Tesla's GPS cheerfully announced, "Destination not found." No listing for Mackey's Diner on Route 7. Marcus and Ethan sat in the parking lot of a defunct gas station. Their grand adventure stalled before it had truly begun. The silence that filled the car was different from their usual silence. Not hostile, but uncertain. Like two musicians who'd forgotten how to play the same song. "It's been 8 years," Ethan said, staring out the window. "Of course it's gone." Marcus gripped the steering wheel, feeling the weight of yet another disappointment he was delivering to his son. Some father he was turning out to be. Couldn't even find a diner. "We could try. There's a Starbucks 2 miles that way." Ethan's voice was flat, resigned. "Or we could just go home. You probably have emails piling up. The old Marcus would have seized the escape route. But the man who'd seen his son's drawings, who'd slept in the library surrounded by failure, who'd made a promise just 30 minutes ago, that man couldn't retreat. "Not yet. Your mother loved that place," Marcus heard himself say. "She said their coffee tasted like dishwater. But she ordered it anyway, because the owner's daughter had just gotten into Yale, and your mom wanted to celebrate with them." Ethan turned, surprise flickering across his face. Mrs. Chen, I think that was her name. Her daughter wanted to be a doctor. Marcus was amazed he remembered this, amazed these memories existed under layers of spreadsheets and conference calls. "Your mother bought them a stethoscope as a graduation gift. Brought it wrapped to the diner like it was normal to give medical equipment to someone's scrambled eggs." A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. "That sounds like Mom." "She saw people," Marcus continued, the words flowing now like a dam breaking. "Really saw them. The busboy saving for art school, the waitress whose husband had dementia, the regular who'd just lost his dog. She knew everyone's story. And you remembered them too," Ethan said quietly. Marcus realized with a jolt that he had. Somehow, through all of Diane's chatter about people's lives, their dreams, their struggles, he'd absorbed it all. He'd just buried it, convinced that caring about the Mrs. Chens of the world was a luxury he couldn't afford while building an empire. "She made me remember," Marcus admitted. "Without her, I forgot how." They sat in that confession for a moment. Then Ethan did something unexpected. He pulled out his phone and started typing. "What are you doing?" "Looking up Mrs. Chen's daughter. If she became a doctor in Connecticut, she should be—" Ethan's face lit up. "Found her, Dr. Sarah Chen, pediatrician in Stamford. Her practice is called Second Chances Pediatrics." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Second chances? There's a number," Ethan said, then hesitated. "Should I—" "Call her." Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he dialed. Marcus watched his son's face, seeing him transform from guarded teenager to determined detective. The phone rang once, twice, then a receptionist's voice filtered through the speaker. "Second Chances Pediatrics, how may I help you?" "Hi, this is going to sound weird, but I'm looking for Dr. Chen, not as a patient." "It's about her mother's diner." There was a pause. "One moment, please." They waited, the car's climate control humming softly. Then a woman's voice came on the line, warm and curious. "This is Dr. Chen. You're asking about my mother's diner." Ethan glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragement. "My name is Ethan Wellington. My mom was Diane Wellington. She used to—" "Oh my God, Mrs. Wellington?" Dr. Chen's voice cracked with emotion. "She gave me my first stethoscope. I still have it in my office. How is she?" "Is she— She passed away," Marcus interjected gently, taking the phone from Ethan. 3 years ago. This is her husband, Marcus." The line went quiet except for soft crying. "I'm so sorry. She was the kindest person. When my mother sold the diner after Dad got sick, Mrs. Wellington sent flowers and a check for my student loans. She barely knew us, but she said every doctor should start their career without debt weighing them down." Marcus had forgotten that. No, he'd never known it. Diane had done it quietly, the way she did most of her kindnesses. "The diner," Marcus said. "What happened to it?" "It's a yoga studio now, but—" Dr. Chen paused. "My mother still lives in Stamford. She'd love to see you, both of you. She talks about Mrs. Wellington all the time. About the Sunday mornings when your family would come in, and Mrs. Wellington would help fold napkins while you did the crossword puzzle with Ethan on your lap. Marcus's eyes widened. I did crossword puzzles? Every Sunday, Dr. Chen confirmed. My mother said you two were a team. Ethan would shout out letters, and you'd ruffle his hair every time he got one right. Ethan was staring at Marcus like he was seeing a ghost. I don't remember that. You were little, Dr. Chen said. Maybe 4 or 5 years old? But my mother remembers. She remembers everything about those Sundays. She says they were the happiest mornings at the diner. 20 minutes later, they were parked outside a small ranch house in a Stamford suburb. Mrs. Chen, now Mrs. Margaret Chen, widowed but radiant at 73, had insisted they come immediately. I'm making pancakes, she'd declared. The same recipe I used at the diner. She met them at the door, a tiny woman with silver hair and eyes that crinkled with joy and sorrow. You look just like your mother, she said to Ethan, pulling him into a hug that he initially resisted. Then melted into, to Marcus, she said nothing at first. Just studied his face with the wisdom of someone who'd served coffee to lonely people for 40 years. You've been lost, she said finally. Yes, Marcus admitted. Come in. Pancakes help with that. Her kitchen was small, nothing like the Wellington's chef's paradise, but it smelled like home, like Sunday mornings from a lifetime ago. She moved with practiced efficiency, mixing batter by hand while talking about the old days. Your wife would sit at the counter right there, she pointed. She'd grade papers. She was always grading papers, but she'd stop every few minutes to chat. She knew about my Jerry's dialysis schedule, about Sarah's exams, about everything. And you, Mr. Wellington, you'd be in the booth with Ethan, teaching him words. I taught him words? Marcus felt like he was learning about a stranger. Big ones. You'd point to things in the newspaper and make up silly definitions until Ethan learned the real ones. Amalgamation, you said it meant when pancakes and syrup become best friends. Ethan laughed, really. Laughed, and the sound filled the small kitchen like music. Mrs. Chen flipped pancakes with expert precision. Then something changed. You stopped coming. I worried, but people get busy. Life happens. I didn't know about Diane until Sarah told me years later. She placed plates in front of them, perfect golden pancakes with butter melting into smiles made of chocolate chips. Just like Diane used to make. Marcus stared at his plate, overwhelmed. Ethan picked up his fork, hesitated, then looked at his father. Together? Ethan asked. Together, Marcus agreed. They ate in Mrs. Chen's kitchen, and with each bite, Marcus felt something shift. The pancakes tasted like memory, like possibility, like all the Sunday mornings he'd forgotten to treasure until they were gone. You know what your wife told me once, Mrs. Chen said, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. She said that raising Ethan was like watching a miracle in slow motion. Every day, something new to wonder at. I missed so much, Marcus said, his voice breaking. So much of the miracle. But you're here now, Mrs. Chen said firmly. That counts for something. In my culture, we say it's never too late to begin again. Each sunrise is a new chance. Ethan reached for more syrup, and their hands touched accidentally. Neither pulled away immediately. It was such a small thing, this brief contact, but it felt monumental. These are good, Ethan said quietly. Not as good as Mom's, but close. Your mother had a secret ingredient, Mrs. Chen confided. She added vanilla extract and a tiny bit of cinnamon. She shared the recipe with me one Sunday. Said she wanted Ethan to always be able to find home in a pancake. I could never make them right, Marcus admitted. After she died, I tried once. Burned them, threw out the pan, and never tried again. Pancakes take practice, Mrs. Chen said. And patience. And the willingness to fail a few times before you succeed. She was talking about more than pancakes, and they all knew it. Could you? Ethan started, then stopped, then forced himself to continue. Could you teach us? The recipe? Marcus looked at his son, stunned. Us. Ethan clarified, meeting his father's eyes. Maybe we could learn together? Mrs. Chen beamed. I have a better idea. Come back next Sunday. Same time as you used to. We'll make them together, the three of us. Make it a tradition. I have a board meeting next Sunday, Marcus said automatically, then stopped himself. Or I can move it. I can definitely move it. You sure? Ethan's voice was careful, guarded against hope. Marcus pulled out his phone. He'd grabbed it from the counter before leaving. Old habits dying hard, and right there, in Mrs. Chen's kitchen. He sent an email to his assistant. Reschedule all Sunday commitments indefinitely. New priority has emerged. He showed the screen to Ethan. All Sundays? Ethan whispered. All Sundays, Marcus confirmed. We have a lot of pancakes to learn how to make. Mrs. Chen wiped tears from her eyes. Diane would be so happy. She worried, toward the end. Worried about you two finding your way without her. We got lost, Marcus said. But maybe we're finding the map again. They stayed for 2 hours, looking through Mrs. Chen's photo albums, pictures of the diner, of regular customers, of Sunday mornings when the Wellington family was whole. There they were, Marcus with Ethan on his lap, both of them laughing at something. Diane with flour on her nose from helping in the kitchen. Ethan, maybe 5 years old, wearing a paper chef's hat someone had made him. These people in the photos, they seemed like strangers. But also, impossibly, they seemed like a future Marcus could reach for. A past he could reclaim. When they finally left, Mrs. Chen hugged them both. Next Sunday, she reminded them. 7 a.m. sharp? And Mr. Wellington, bring a willingness to make a mess. Pancakes are messy business. In the car, driving back to Greenwich, the silence was different again. Comfortable, almost. Ethan was looking through photos on his phone. Pictures Mrs. Chen had texted him of the old diner days. I don't remember being that happy, Ethan said softly. Neither do I, Marcus admitted. But we were. Once upon a time we knew how. Can we learn again? Marcus reached over slowly, giving Ethan time to pull away. When he didn't, Marcus ruffled his son's hair, awkward. Unpracticed but genuine, I think, Marcus said. That's exactly what we're going to do. For the first time in 3 years, the drive home felt like heading towards something rather than running away. The Wellington estate would still be there, with all its empty rooms and expensive silence. But now maybe it could become something else, one Sunday at a time, one pancake at a time. One small win at a time they had started. The counseling session was scheduled for Friday at 3 p.m. Marcus had survived 4 days of tentative progress, awkward dinners where they actually sat together, stilted conversations about school, even a disastrous attempt at helping with homework where Marcus realized he didn't understand freshman algebra anymore. But they were trying. They were showing up. Friday morning, everything fell apart. Marcus woke to 17 missed calls from his CFO, Richard Brennan. The timestamp showed they'd started at 2 a.m. His stomach dropped as he dialed back, already knowing this was bad. Very bad. Where the hell have you been? Richard's voice was ice and panic. The Singapore deal is imploding. The corporation found irregularities in the environmental impact reports. They're threatening to pull $300 million in funding and go public with fraud allegations. The room spun. The Singapore project was Marcus's crown jewel, a sustainable development that would revolutionize urban living in Southeast Asia. 2 years of negotiations, partnerships with governments, the future of Wellington Global Properties riding on its success. That's impossible. I reviewed every document myself. Someone doctored the reports, Marcus. EPA levels, carbon footprint projections, all of it falsified. And it traces back to our office. Lee Corporation is giving us 24 hours to respond, or they're calling a press conference that will destroy us. Marcus was already moving, pulling on clothes, his mind racing through solutions. Get legal on it. Find out who... It gets worse, Richard's voice cracked. The FBI is involved. They're calling it corporate fraud. There's talk of a criminal investigation. Marcus, they could come after you personally. Prison time. The word prison hit like a physical blow. Marcus sat heavily on the bed, his carefully rebuilt world crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. I need you in New York in 2 hours, Richard continued. The lawyers, the board, everyone's waiting. This is extinction level, Marcus. If we don't handle this perfectly, Wellington Global Properties is finished. Marcus looked at the clock. 7:47 a.m. The counseling session was in 7 hours and 13 minutes. The first real step toward healing his relationship with Ethan. The appointment, Dr. Morrison had said, wasn't optional, was critical, was potentially the only chance to save his son from sliding further into whatever darkness had made him stop eating, stop living. "I'll be there in 90 minutes, Marcus heard himself say. He ended the call and sat in the silence of his bedroom, the weight of impossible choices crushing down on him. 20 years of building an empire versus 4 days of rebuilding a relationship with his son. The practical choice was obvious. Without the company, how would he provide for Ethan? The estate, the school, the future, all of it depended on Wellington Global Properties surviving. But the look on Ethan's face when Marcus had promised to show up, to be there, to choose him. Marcus walked downstairs to find Ethan already at the breakfast table, wearing the denim jacket he seemed to live in lately. He was actually eating toast with peanut butter, a small victory from their week of trying. "Morning," Ethan said, and there was something different in his voice. Something lighter, hope maybe, or the beginning of trust. Marcus felt that hope shatter in his chest like glass. "Ethan, He couldn't finish. "How do you tell your son that the business crisis you swore wouldn't matter anymore actually does matter? That the empire is more important than the counseling session that might save his life?" Ethan's face changed, hardening like cooling metal. "You have to go. There's a situation in Singapore. The entire company—" "You have to go," Ethan repeated, standing up. His toast fell to the floor. "Of course you do. It's always something. Tokyo, Berlin, Dubai, Singapore. There's always somewhere more important than here. This is different. This is criminal charges, potential prison time. If I don't fix this, then fix it," Ethan shouted, the first time Marcus had heard him raise his voice in years. "Fix your precious company. Build your empire. Just don't pretend this week meant anything. Don't pretend pancakes and Sunday promises matter when the first crisis comes along. Ethan, please understand. I understand perfectly." Ethan's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I understand that I will never be important enough. That nothing will ever be important enough. Mom died and you chose work. I almost starved myself, and you'll still choose work. What does it take, Dad? What do I have to do to matter more than a conference call?" The question hung between them like an accusation and a plea. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. Because what could he say? That Ethan was wrong? But the car was already on its way to take him to New York. That the company didn't matter. But 20 years of his life, thousands of jobs, his entire identity was wrapped up in Wellington Global Properties. "The counseling session," Marcus started. "Forget it." Ethan grabbed his backpack. "I'll tell Gerald to take me to school. You do what you always do. Win, succeed, conquer. Just don't expect me to be here when you get back." "What do you mean?" Ethan turned at the doorway, and Marcus saw it. The same look he'd had in the nurse's office. The defeated acceptance of someone who'd stopped expecting anything different. "I'm done waiting for you to choose me. I'm 14 years old, and I've spent 3 years begging for scraps of your attention. Yesterday, Mrs. Martinez told me about boarding schools. Choate, Exeter, places where at least my abandonment would be official instead of just this." He gestured at the kitchen, at the house, at everything. "At least there, I wouldn't have to watch you choose everything else every single day." Marcus felt his heart stop. "Boarding school? You can't. Why not? You're never here anyway. What difference does it make if I'm in Connecticut or Massachusetts? At least there, I'd stop hoping for something that's never going to happen." The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted them. Through the window, Marcus saw his driver, James, waiting to take him to New York. To save the company. To choose the empire over his son. Again. Ethan saw the car, too. Something in his face just extinguished. "Go," he said quietly. "Your real priority is waiting." Marcus stood paralyzed, literally caught between two worlds. Through one door, his driver waited, ready to rush him to New York, to lawyers and board members, and the fight to save everything he'd built. Through another door, his son was walking away, taking with him any chance of healing, of family, of the second chance Marcus had barely begun to grasp. Marcus started. I could call Richard. Tell him to handle it. The lawyers don't need me there. I could send Jennifer or... Stop! Ethan's voice was dead. Just stop! We both know you're going. You've already decided. You decided the second that phone rang, so just go. Be the Marcus Wellington everyone else needs. I'll be fine. I've been fine without you for 3 years. What's another 3 or 10 or 20? Rosa appeared in the doorway, having heard everything. She looked at Marcus with something like disgust mixed with disappointment. Choose, she said simply. Right now, choose. Marcus's phone buzzed. Richard again. The lawyers are waiting. Every minute we delay makes this worse. Where are you? Another buzz. Dr. Morrison. Reminder, family counseling today at 3 p.m. Both parents required. This is Ethan's last chance before we have to consider more intensive interventions. Intensive interventions. Boarding school. Criminal charges. 20 years of work. 4 days of hope. Everything colliding in this moment, in this kitchen, in this impossible choice. The driver honked gently. A reminder. A summons. A test. Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him. The denim jacket worn to threads. The weight loss that made him seem to disappear inside his clothes. The eyes that had learned not to hope. The boy who'd drawn imaginary houses where his father might stay. The teenager who was offering one last chance before giving up entirely. Then he looked at his phone, at Richard's messages about prison time, about fraud, about the FBI, at the empire built over 20 years that could crumble in 24 hours. At the future he'd constructed brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, absence by absence. Mr. Wellington, Rosa said, her voice breaking. Por favor. Don't do this again. Ethan didn't say anything. He just stood there, waiting for the inevitable, waiting to be chosen last, waiting to confirm what he'd always suspected, that he would never be enough to compete with Marcus Wellington's real love. Success. Marcus took a step toward the door, toward the car, toward New York and lawyers and salvation for everything except what mattered most. Ethan's face didn't change. He'd expected this. Of course he had. Marcus took another step, then stopped. His hand trembled as he pulled out his phone, not to check messages, not to coordinate logistics, but to make the call that would either save his son or destroy his empire. He couldn't do both. For the first time in his life, Marcus Wellington had to choose between winning and loving. The phone rang in his hand, waiting for his decision. In the doorway, Ethan stood frozen, not daring to hope, not able to stop hoping. Rosa held her breath. The driver waited outside, and Marcus Wellington, master of his universe, stood at the crossroads of his life, paralyzed by the weight of the choice that would define everything that came after. The clock showed 8:03 a.m., 7 hours until the counseling session, 22 hours until the FBI deadline. A lifetime of consequences waiting on a single decision. His finger hovered over the dial button. Everything, absolutely everything, hung in the balance of what he did next. Marcus's finger pressed the button, but instead of calling Richard, he dialed a different number, one he hadn't used in 3 years. This is Marcus Wellington, he said, his voice steady, despite everything crumbling around him. I need to speak with Robert Hastings at the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. Tell him it's about the Singapore investigation into Wellington Global Properties. Tell him I'm surrendering myself for questioning immediately. Ethan's head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. Marcus continued, and tell him I'm bringing every document, every email, every piece of evidence I have. I'll waive my right to have counsel present for the initial interview. I have nothing to hide. He paused, then added, but I need one condition. The interview happens here, at my home at 5 p.m. today. After 3 p.m., I have a prior commitment that cannot be moved. He ended the call and immediately dialed Richard. Marcus, finally. Where are you? I'm not coming to New York, Richard. I'm meeting with the FBI at my home this evening. I want you to courier every single document related to the Singapore project to my house by noon. Everything. Have you lost your mind? You can't just, yes, I can. And Richard, find out who doctored those reports. I want names by 2 p.m. or you're fired. Marcus's voice was ice. Someone tried to destroy this company, and I will find out who. But I'm doing it my way, on my timeline, from my home. He hung up on Richard's sputtering protests and turned to face his son. Ethan stood frozen, his backpack sliding off his shoulder. You're not going. I'm not going, Marcus confirmed. The FBI can come here. The lawyers can work remotely. The board can handle the crisis without me standing in a conference room. He walked toward Ethan, each step deliberate. But I cannot miss that counseling session. I cannot miss another moment with you. Not for Singapore, not for the FBI, not for anything. But the company, your empire, Ethan's voice cracked, means nothing if I lose you. Marcus said it simply, like stating a fact. I finally understand that. Without you, every building I've constructed is just empty space. Every deal I've closed is just numbers on paper. Every success is hollow. Tears streamed down Ethan's face. You could go to prison. Maybe. Probably not. I didn't falsify anything. But even if I did, Marcus took a breath. Even if I did, at least you'd know I chose you. At least you'd visit me, knowing your father finally put you first. The absurdity of it. The image of Marcus Wellington in prison orange. Ethan visiting through plexiglass made them both laugh through their tears. It was a broken sound, but it was genuine. That's insane, Ethan said, completely. Marcus smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. But I'm done being sane, if sane means losing you. Rosa, who'd been watching from the doorway, crossed herself and whispered something in Spanish. Then louder, I'll call Dr. Morrison. Tell her you'll both be there. The next few hours were chaos. Lawyers arrived with briefcases. Couriers delivered boxes of documents. Richard showed up in person, furious and confused, demanding to know what Marcus was doing. But through it all, Marcus stayed in the house. He worked from the kitchen table while Ethan did homework across from him. They ordered pizza for lunch, burned edges and everything, and ate it together while reviewing email chains about permits and environmental studies. At 1:47 p.m., Richard burst in with news. Found him. Trevor fucking Michaels from our accounting department. He's been embezzling for 2 years, doctored the Singapore reports to cover his tracks. When Lee Corporation started their audit, he panicked and made it look like company-wide fraud instead of his personal theft. Evidence? Marcus asked, not looking up from helping Ethan with a chemistry problem, enough to bury him. I've already contacted Lee Corporation and the FBI. They're reviewing it now. Good. Fire Michaels. Cooperate fully with all investigations. And Richard? Marcus finally looked up. Handle the board meeting. You're the CEO now. Acting, but if this goes well, permanent. Richard's mouth fell open. You're stepping down? I'm stepping back. There's a difference. I'll remain chairman, but the day-to-day. That's yours. I have other priorities now. He glanced at Ethan, who was staring at him with something like awe. At 2:54 p.m., Marcus stood from the kitchen table, gathering the legal documents he needed to review before the FBI arrived. We should go. Ethan grabbed his jacket, the worn denim one that now seemed like armor against disappointment. Are you sure? The FBI will wait. This can't. They drove to Dr. Morrison's office in silence, but it was the comfortable silence of two people who'd survived a battle together. In the waiting room, surrounded by magazines about mindfulness and posters about emotional health, they sat side by side. I'm scared, Ethan admitted quietly. Me too, Marcus said. What if we can't fix this? What if it's too broken? Marcus thought about his own father, the beatings, the emotional desert, the man who taught him that love was weakness. He thought about the 3 years he'd wasted, the moments he'd missed, the damage he'd done. Then he thought about Ethan's drawings, about Mrs. Chen's pancakes, about second chances. Then we'll be broken together, Marcus said. But we'll keep trying. Every day, every hour if we have to. Dr. Morrison called them in. Her office was warm, filled with soft light and comfortable chairs that didn't feel like furniture bought to impress. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Thank you both for coming," she said, settling into her chair. "I understand this week has been eventful." "That's one word for it," Marcus said. For the next hour they talked. Really talked. Ethan spoke about the loneliness, about feeling invisible in his own home, about the drawings that were his only way to keep his father alive in his heart. Marcus spoke about Diane's death, about his terror of failing as a parent, about choosing distance because grief was easier to manage than love. Dr. Morrison listened, guided, challenged. She made Marcus acknowledge that his father's cruelty had taught him to equate emotion with danger. She made Ethan admit that his withdrawal had been a form of self-protection, a way to avoid being hurt again. "You've both been living in fear," she said finally. "Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of connection. But here's what I see. Two people who love each other desperately and have forgotten how to show it. How do we remember?" Marcus asked. "You already have. You're here. You chose this appointment over saving your company. That's not forgetting. That's remembering what matters most." When the session ended, Dr. Morrison scheduled weekly appointments. "This is just the beginning," she warned. "Healing takes time. There will be setbacks, arguments, moments when old patterns resurface. But you're committed now." Both of you. They walked out into the late afternoon sun. It was 4:47 p.m. The FBI would be at the house in 13 minutes. "Ready to face the music?" Marcus asked. Ethan surprised him by taking his hand, the first time in 3 years. "Together?" Together. The FBI interview lasted 3 hours. Agent Hastings and his team were thorough, but Richard's evidence was solid. By 8 p.m. they were packing up, satisfied that Marcus was a victim of embezzlement, not a perpetrator of fraud. "We'll need you available for further questioning," Hastings said at the door. "Don't leave the country." "I won't be leaving Connecticut," Marcus assured him. "I have pancake lessons on Sunday mornings now." Hastings looked confused, but didn't ask. After they left, Marcus and Ethan stood in the quiet house. Rosa had prepared dinner, real dinner meant to be eaten together at the table. "So," Ethan said as they sat down. "What now?" Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him. Still too thin, still carrying the weight of abandonment, but with something new in his eyes. "Hope, maybe. Or possibility. Now we learn," Marcus said. "We learn how to be a family again. We learn how to make pancakes. We learn how to talk to each other without walls between us. We learn how to be imperfect together instead of perfectly apart. That's a lot of learning. We have time. And something tells me we're both pretty good students when we actually show up for class." They ate dinner together, talking about everything and nothing. Ethan's classes, Marcus's decision to step back from the company, the boarding school pamphlets that would go in the trash, the Sundays stretching ahead of them full of pancakes and second chances. Later, after dishes were done and the house settled into evening, Marcus stood outside Ethan's bedroom door. He raised his hand to knock, hesitated, then did it anyway. "Come in," Ethan called. Marcus entered his son's room for the first time in years. It was different than he remembered. Teenage chaos, mixed with carefully hidden vulnerability. On the wall were new drawings, different from the desperate portraits in the attic. These showed the future. The two of them at Mrs. Chen's kitchen, laughing. At the counseling office, talking. In this very room, father and son, bridging the gap. "I was thinking," Ethan said from where he sat on his bed. "Maybe we could go through Mom's art studio this weekend. Together, there might be supplies I could use." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I'd like that. And maybe," Ethan hesitated, "maybe you could tell me stories about her. Not the sad parts. The happy parts. The Sunday morning parts. I have so many stories," Marcus said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Like the time she convinced me to enter a sandcastle building contest, and we came in last because she insisted on adding a moat with real water." Ethan laughed. "Tell me," so Marcus did. He told stories until his voice grew hoarse, until Ethan's eyes grew heavy, until the past didn't feel like a wound, but a gift they could share. "Dad," Ethan said sleepily. "Yeah?" "I'm glad you stayed." Marcus leaned down and for the first time in 3 years kissed his son's forehead. "Me too, buddy. Me too." He turned off the light but left the door open. No more barriers, no more walls. As he walked to his own room, he passed Rosa in the hallway. She was crying happy tears. "Mrs. Diane would be proud," she whispered. "I hope so," Marcus said. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that." That night, Marcus slept better than he had in years. Not because his problems were solved. The company still faced challenges. His relationship with Ethan was still fragile. There were years of damage to undo. But because, for the first time since Diane died, he wasn't running from love. He was running toward it. Sunday morning came bright and clear. At 6:45 a.m., Marcus knocked on Ethan's door. "Pancake time," he called. Ethan emerged, rumpled and smiling. They drove to Mrs. Chen's together, the radio playing softly, no urgent calls interrupting the peace. Mrs. Chen taught them how to mix the batter, how to know when the pan was ready, how to flip without breaking. They burned the first batch. The second stuck to the pan. The third were misshapen but edible. They laughed through it all, flour dusting their clothes, syrup sticky on their fingers. "Practice makes perfect," Mrs. Chen said, watching them with grandmotherly pride. "Or at least makes progress," Marcus amended, looking at his son. "Progress is perfect enough," Ethan agreed. They ate their imperfect pancakes in Mrs. Chen's sunny kitchen, making plans for next Sunday and the Sunday after that. Building a tradition, one breakfast at a time. Learning to be father and son again, one pancake at a time. Outside, the Connecticut morning stretched into possibility. Wellington Global Properties would survive, or it wouldn't. The house would sell or stay empty. Life would throw challenges and changes their way, but in Mrs. Chen's kitchen, eating pancakes that tasted like home and second chances. Marcus Wellington finally understood what his wife had known all along, that the greatest empire a man could build wasn't made of steel and glass, but of love and time and the courage to choose what mattered most. He watched Ethan laugh at something Mrs. Chen said, watched the light return to eyes that had been dark too long, watched his son become whole again, and Marcus Wellington, who'd built an empire but almost lost a son, who'd chosen success over love until love taught him what success really meant, reached across the table and took his son's hand. Ethan didn't pull away. They sat there, hands clasped across syrup-sticky plates, and began their Sunday morning together finally, beautifully, imperfectly together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.